They thought they were clever. They thought they could send in imposters dressed as cops, slap some flashing lights on an unmarked car, and intimidate me into handing over my Porsche. What they didn't realize was that I wasn't just another homeowner bound by HOA nonsense. I was a U.S. Marshal, trained to spot fakes, dismantle threats, and bring justice crashing down on anyone reckless enough to test me. This wasn't just about a car. This was about exposing corruption, arrogance, and one Karen who thought she was untouchable. Before we dive into this insane story, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tap the notification bell so you never miss another unbelievable HOA drama story. These stories only get crazier, and trust me, you'll want to be here for the ending. Chapter 1 began in a quiet, upscale neighborhood where appearances mattered more than authenticity. The lawns were trimmed like golf courses, the sidewalks spotless, and the HOA rules enforced with the intensity of a military command. It was a place that thrived on image, and nobody embodied that obsession more than Karen, the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood. She wasn't on the HOA board officially, but her influence stretched across every decision, every complaint, every whisper. She thrived on intimidation, using her connections and manipulations to bend others into submission. I had moved into the neighborhood recently, keeping a low profile. To them, I was just another man with a good-paying job and an eye for cars. They noticed my Porsche immediately, a gleaming black beauty that represented not just money but freedom. For Karen, it was a symbol she couldn't tolerate, a reminder that someone other than her could command attention. The tension began with subtle notes left on my windshield. "This car doesn't belong here. Report your vehicle to HOA compliance. Luxury vehicles must be registered." But when I checked the actual rulebook, there was no such clause. Karen was inventing restrictions out of thin air. I ignored her petty harassment, but she escalated. Fines started arriving in my mailbox, bogus, unsigned, and clearly her handiwork. Neighbors told me she bragged about putting the Porsche guy in his place. Still, I stayed calm. I had seen worse power games in my line of work. But what she didn't know was who I really was. I wasn't just a homeowner. I was a U.S. Marshal, trained to read people, spot deception, and dismantle organized schemes. I had taken down gangs, infiltrated cartels, and arrested fugitives. An HOA Karen was small compared to what I'd seen, but her arrogance made her dangerous. And then one evening, things turned from petty harassment to criminal. Flashing red and blue lights suddenly illuminated my driveway. Two men stepped out of a dark SUV, dressed in cheap police uniforms, badges barely visible in the dark. They demanded my car, claiming it was impounded under HOA authority. It was a sloppy act, but it confirmed what I suspected. Karen had escalated her campaign into fraud. She thought fake cops would scare me. She had no idea she was walking straight into a trap of her own making. And so Chapter 1 ended, with the night filled by flashing lights, imposters standing bold in my driveway, and the storm about to break. Chapter 2 opened with me standing still, calm, letting the fake cops think they had control. They puffed their chests, throwing around fake legal jargon, waving counterfeit paperwork like it was legitimate. To an untrained eye, it might have worked. But I saw every flaw. Their uniforms were mismatched, their belts carried knockoff gear, and their vehicle lacked a proper plate. They weren't cops. They were actors in a bad play directed by Karen. My instincts sharpened. I had dealt with imposters before, and the first rule was never to give them the satisfaction of panic. I let them rattle off their fake authority while I subtly memorized their faces, movements, and the way they communicated. One called the other bro mid-sentence, a mistake no real officer would make in a professional encounter. Behind them, I caught movement. Karen standing at a distance on her porch, arms crossed, sipping wine, her smug grin lit by the glow of the street lamp. She thought she was orchestrating the perfect humiliation. She thought I'd cave and hand over my keys. Instead, I played along, feigning confusion, stalling just long enough to gather what I needed. Then, with deliberate calm, I pulled out my real badge. A U.S. Marshal badge doesn't need words. The gold glint alone is enough to shift the air. The fake cops froze, their confidence evaporating. Their eyes darted toward Karen, searching for direction, but she suddenly disappeared into her house, slamming the door behind her. I kept my tone steady, professional, as I informed them they were under investigation for impersonating law enforcement, a federal crime with severe consequences. Panic hit them hard. One tried to run, but I was faster, pinning him against the SUV with controlled force. The other dropped to his knees, begging. I called in local police for backup, securing them until real officers arrived. By the time flashing squad cars filled the street, neighbors had poured out of their homes, wide-eyed and whispering. The story spread instantly. Karen had sent fake cops to steal a neighbor's car, and that neighbor turned out to be a U.S. Marshal. The humiliation she had tried to orchestrate had backfired, and her empire of fear began to crumble. But the fight wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to back down after exposure. She would dig deeper, manipulate harder, and try to flip the narrative in her favor. And that's where Chapter 2 ended, with her hiding behind her curtains, the neighborhood buzzing, and me preparing for the inevitable counterstrike. Chapter 3 began with the fallout. The fake cops sang like canaries once in custody, spilling every detail. Karen had paid them cash, promised them protection, and convinced them it was just a scare tactic. But impersonating officers wasn't a prank. It was a federal offense. Charges stacked quickly, and investigators zeroed in on Karen, but true to form, she twisted the story, playing the victim. She claimed she had been misled, that she thought the men were real officers, that she had no idea what they planned. Some neighbors bought into her act. Others weren't so easily fooled. I watched her carefully during those weeks, noting every attempt to manipulate the HOA board into rallying around her. She launched smear campaigns, painting me as aggressive, dangerous, someone who had set her up. But the truth was already out. The HOA board fractured under the pressure, half siding with her, half wanting nothing to do with her sinking ship. Meanwhile, I remained calm, letting the system work while gathering my own evidence. I documented every false fine, every letter, every word she had written. Neighbors who had once been too scared to speak began sharing their stories, recounting years of her intimidation tactics. A pattern of harassment unfolded, thicker than even I had imagined. When the day of her hearing arrived, the courtroom was packed. Her lawyers tried to spin the narrative, painting her as misunderstood. But the weight of evidence was undeniable. Financial records, witness testimonies, and the damning confessions of the imposters she had hired. As the judge read out the charges and the sentence, Karen's mask cracked. The smug smile disappeared, replaced by panic and disbelief. She had gone from self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood to a convicted criminal facing real consequences. The neighborhood changed after that. Without her toxic influence, peace returned. People smiled again, children played freely, and the HOA board rebuilt its structure with fairness and accountability. As for me, I kept living quietly, never boasting about what had happened. The Porsche remained in my driveway, not as a symbol of luxury, but as a reminder of a battle fought and won. And so Chapter 3 ended, with justice served, the bully dethroned, and the neighborhood finally free from her grasp. And that's the story of how one HOA Karen's arrogance spiraled into federal crime, and how she was dismantled by the very neighbor she thought she could control. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another tale of shocking HOA drama. Karma and justice served right where it's deserved.